we're doing a live show today from Detroit. We're at NANDI'S, not Detroit. We're in Highland Park. And we have a special guest in the house tonight. And we're going to do some real good historical revisionism. There we go. And our program is, today's date is March 7th, 2015. And we're going to talk about the Paleo Americans, which I like to call copper people. But this young man, this my guest, going to set me straight and push me on further a little bit out there so we can get a little further in history. So let me introduce the guest. Let me do it slow. Nasser M. Nehe Ali. Nasser M. Nehe Ali. I'm going to just say Nasser Ali, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. That's quite fine.
All right. So, you are from Chicago?
No, I'm not. I set dirt in Mishka, here in Lansing, in Ingham County.
Oh.
I'm home.
Oh, okay. All right. Let me cut this music down and let's get started. Mm-hmm. Let me start out by telling you I have a book called Yesterdays, Detroit Yesterdays. Okay. And it's about copper people. And I kept saying to myself, what does Sam Hill could be copper people, you know? So as I read, there was a small paragraph about them. And they said they were here 4,000 or 6,000 years prior to the coming of the Europeans, which got my attention. And they came out of Saginaw, Michigan. So when I did some further research, I found out for the first time, and everybody in here today with our live audience should know, that Detroit, not Detroit per se, but Michigan is the largest copper deposit in the United States. And they just filed bankruptcy on Detroit. How can that be? But I got a young man, when they told me about this brother, I said, I got to get him in here and set me straight and set everybody straight. So where did I go wrong? Where am I short in regards to the copper people, Saginaw? They mentioned Kansas. They mentioned something else too. There's a riff, a continental riff of a Toronto area, Michigan, that you could pick it up right off the top of the ground. Mm-hmm. So let me know what's happening there, bro.
Well, first of all, this is actually one of my favorite topics. The first thing I would probably want to do is bring your attention to what you gave me.
Yes.
So you said between 4,000 and 6,000 years before the Europeans.
Plymouth Rock.
14 at the maximum means 4,500 years BC.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Copper people, in reference to the mining of copper, you can't confuse that with the dates for modern humans being in the Americas. That is kind of like when they said the Clovis Point people. Mm-hmm. The Clovis was never a specific race of people. They were used to describe a specific style of arrowhead. It was more of a cultural description than an actual morphological shape. Okay, so then
that confuses the matter more, because if you don't know what they're talking about, you're really going to get hooked up. Is that true?
That is absolutely true, because they're not giving you the full timeline. Most people, okay, I'll give you an example. I stayed south of Chicago, and one day, about 5 years ago, I was getting my oil change to AutoZone. I'm sitting up in there, I'm just reading, and this old white guy saw me read my own book. Yeah, I was reading it. And so he just leaned up and he said, what you reading there, young man? He's like, okay. So naturally, I'm excited, so I start talking about my book. And then he just gets real calm and he says, well, you know, and he reaches over his shoulder and he points to the Home Depot about 3 blocks away, and he says, oh, right behind the Home Depot, they got arrowheads back there. They're right here. The people you're talking about used to live here too.
Whoa.
Now, here's the funny thing. I wasn't done with the conversation, so I always do this test with people. I said, you know what those people look like, right? I was referring to the Paleo Americans. Mm-hmm. I said, you know what those people look like, right? He got really calm. He looked me in my face, and he said, yes, I do. And he said, what do you do for a living? And then I showed him the author's name on the book. I said, I lecture about this. This is what I do. He said, okay. He's like, oh, no. He's like, that's nice. He said, where we stay here has an amateur anthropology association. You probably might want to call him, but he wasn't done. Then he said, so where do you lecture? I said, on the south side of Chicago. He laughed.
What did he mean by that?
He was inferring that me trying to express to our own people that they had been here before the American Indians and before the Europeans, as far back as he knew Paleo Americans were, and he knew they were Negro people. He didn't really believe that our people would actually get it.
Well, he was kind of right.
He's very right. More Europeans know about Paleo Americans and what they look like than the average African American. That's actually the problem, because it changes your whole perspective.
Yes.
There was even on the Facebook wall, a young lady made a post, and she referred to the police officers in New York that locked up the Puerto Rican brother that filmed Gardner when he was getting choked out. Mm-hmm. She referred to them as racist crackers, and I asked her to remove that. And she didn't understand why. I eventually ended up deleting it after I gave her 3 warnings, but here's why. I didn't get emotionally upset because she used the word cracker. My issue was it locks you into only 500 years of Negroid history, and it doesn't allow you to go back 197,000 years because you're talking about the last day or two, and I'm trying to get you to cover the last couple thousand years. Yeah. See, so what would you rather talk about, the last 500 years or the last 196,500 years? Which one would you rather talk about?
But if you're asking me, we got to go back 100,000 years or the
more.
Yes.
That's why it changes the whole discussion.
But I understand why you said that, and I understand why they said it, and I understand why I'm confused, because now I got to have a new way of reading and studying back in history. Yeah. Because you got to know what relates to what and what timeline are they coming out of.
Yeah, it's a serious game changer because it changes the scale of the timeline that you associate with yourself being on this dirt.
Wow. Well, those 500.
It's clear that mass trauma was due to wars between the Americans.
Only a word that was made up by the people. There were so many tribes in America, and the names were long and so confusing to. They just lumped it up with Indians. And they used that with Columbus when he thought it was India, and he said it was Indians.
They were tracing it back to the
Indios,
purple black.
Yes. So you are using the word Indian again.
It's just a descriptor for a phenotype. A phenotype is just what something looks like on the outside, regardless of the genetic characteristics. So if I say Mongoloid, a lot of American Indians would get offended the same way as if I say nigger, a lot of black folks would get offended. Mongoloid describes an actual skull shape. Europid describes a skull shape. Mongoloid describes Chinese, East Indian. Negroid describes the shape, whether it's in Africa, whether it's the Andamanese Negrito, whether it's the Australian Aboriginal or the Paleo American. Negroid describes their skulls are all the same, but they're in different locations. Mm. So when we use those words, I'm not using it except just to describe the actual skeletal shape of what the person physically looks like, and that way you can avoid the part of the social economic stigma associated with that, and just get to the root of the issue, which is how long the people really have been here.
Wow. All right. So how do we put this American history? I'm about freeing the people, and I think the best way to free them is give them education and knowledge and consciousness who they are. Well, I'm tired of being called a Moor, because it spreads itself. It's like a label to me. Now, that's only me, and it's like a label, just like roll color black. Mm-hmm. So if you distinguish it saying watch it no more, or but then I noticed you never mentioned omics. Mm-hmm. Now the omics have a longevity of 10, 20, 30,000 years. that they were here, and they were in the Michigan upper, probably Nova Scotia area, what I understand, and then they migrated down and ended up down in Mexico, down further down. But they have a history also. And then they say the Ouachita and the Dogon and all of them and Mayans were all one group. But now when you use a term that you're dealing with of the skull, but that everybody had a skull in the whole mix. So where does that end, the timeline, Paleo Americans?
They would come towards the end.
The end?
The beginning.
When they come before the copper people?
Yes.
But not before the Paleo.
No, not in time. And even the word Paleo is a Greek word, so it really is merely used to describe them acknowledging that we're there, but not having the ancient story behind the actual people. Well, so, okay, but think about it like this. So, if you have Paleo Americans who they can scientifically prove were here at least 197,000 years, all the way up to the 1600s.
Yep.
Okay, and when I say the 1600s AD, I'm referring to Tanakoha, or Cahokia, which is in Illinois. It's the largest earthen pyramid in the United States, and it's in Illinois.
In that St. Louis area down
there?
Yeah,
it's right. It's literally right. You can stand on the top of it, and you can see the other. Okay. The reason I bring that up is because every book I have read in Chicago, in Illinois, and those in Michigan, I've been to the state libraries in Indianapolis 2 years ago. And most of the libraries where I go look up Cahokia says that the people died out in the 1400s. But when I go to the UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization's website, their official documentation that labels that as a UNESCO World Heritage Site says that people were there until the 1600s. And that at most there were 40,000 people living in that metropolis. So you lost 200 years and nobody said it was a small town. That's 40,000 people. That's not a hamlet. That's a city.
Yes.
So you are correct that the information is there, but they aren't placing it where everybody can have access to it. They aren't hiding it, but they aren't placing it as this is the standard version of the story that we are using. So you are correct, and that also is a human rights violation, because there's a human rights violation that says people have the right to have their story told correctly and have the right to have it modified in the media first. And there's another human right that says people have the right not to be made to disappear.
Now that's deep.
So if you tell me that everybody that looks like you and I only knows that they go back 500 years, I think that's a huge, disappearing act.
Yes.
So,
but they gave us, don't forget now, they gave us the ship Jesus and tried to cut it off on the 500 years that we came over on the ship. I know that's the biggest lie ever told.
That could be taken with a grain of salt. There was a book that my son was reading. My son got in trouble one time, and I made him and my daughter read a book on my library. They got my name. My daughter.
That was punishment.
Yeah, it was punishment. Because I made him pick from the religious category, so there's no pictures. It's all words. So my son picked up the book and he sat down and he read it and he started reading, and it was an analysis of the personal log of a Jesuit priest who was in the central Mesoamerican area when the Portuguese had just gotten there, and he was recounting, or he was reporting, that when they arrived on the shore, they went into the temple from the elders and they saw on the wall, when they got there, a black man on the wall with a spear in his side, sitting on a crucifix. And they were like, what's that? And they were like, they gave the same story. This is our Emancipated Savior. This is the one who saved us. And when they wrote home, the response back from the Vatican was, destroy the bark with the avocado seed used as ink, destroy the bark, and tell them this is the same story, just give them the name that we use. So the story was there. They just changed it. So it's still a story that's familiar to us, because we already knew it before they got here too.
Yes.
So it's like layers to an onion. When somebody says, I'm going to reveal this to you, I get really scared. Because they didn't say unveil, they said reveal.
Mm-hmm. Reveal this thing.
Yeah.
Let me ask anyone out there that has any questions in relationship to where we are, or where we're going, or where you want to be. Just put your hand up and stand up. I recognize you. Stand up. so everybody can hear you. And
Greetings. Okay.
Out here, all these different names you don't even know them. You know, and Paleo, I hadn't heard of that. You know what I'm saying? It sounds like what you're speaking on. It sounds like another 5 boys. You got Paleo, American, Voice American, you got Chickasaw, you got Choctaw, you got Cherokee.
Yeah, there's 500. There's over 500 Native American tribes.
You got, you know, all these different names of tribes of Moors, but they're still all Moors.
Okay.
Different names.
Okay. I don't understand what you're saying.
What's your question?
You know, that Paleo means ancient.
Right. It is used in a scientific research article to describe people that were here actually scientifically before American Indians.
Exactly.
So this isn't although there is an organization, there is a body that is registered at the UN for that. This conversation is not to recruit people for anything. This is strictly a historical lesson to make sure that people are aware. Even the Moors who have the discussion, because I've actually gotten in trouble at a couple more science temples, because the information that I talk about doesn't really match it.
Yes.
Well,
And I'm not. And
because
to me, it doesn't matter though. No, to me, it doesn't matter.
You know, because it's ancient.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's an ancient, that's an indigenous people. First
Mm-hmm.
people on it.
We all agree on that.
So the Paleo are ancient. You know, Choctaws, the Moors, the indigenous inhabitants on this land. And that's what it sounds like to me. You know, which is good. You know, people still need to know who they are, regardless to what tribe you came from. You know what I'm saying? Bottom line is, you still a Moor.
Not really. I mean, everybody doesn't have to be. Nobody can force anybody to be anything.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Oh.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, as a people.
Yes.
That's all I'm saying.
Yes.
As a people, as a melanated group of people that we all know we are, all different shades of brown. You know, we know that. We can't change that. So the fact is that your true nationality is a Moor, which is your nationality, but you have different names.
Well,
you have different names. You have different, you know what I'm saying? But it's still what? Religion?
Well, nationality usually comprises a couple things,
Land.
but that focuses on where we are now. And if you're discussing nationality in the context of this topic, Paleo Americans, you're right. You have to look back, and then you have to look at where you are. But anybody that goes through or is associated with the tribe that call themselves Paleo Americans usually is more aligned to human rights, and they would be more inclined of a slightly different perspective. It's not really the issue of, okay, this is my nation. It's more an issue of we're helpers. So we do what we can to it may not be education. I know a lot of Tepians that just help people in whatever way that they are. Like, I'm a human rights defender. That's actually my second job. So I have 2 major jobs that I do as a consultant, and then as a human rights defender, I actually help people, kind of like what you do with your mortgage foreclosure defense.
Yes.
I have a huge practice for that. I got about 40 clients. So I help people understand that regardless of this conversation about Paleo America is not going to help you if the bank's trying to help you steal your house from you or something like that. It's not really going to do anything for that. You actually have to understand what your responsibility is in the civic system and how to defend and protect. For instance, going back to the Latino brother who got put in jail, he thought that the cops framed him, right? Because he was videotaping Eric Gardner getting choked out over the cigarette.
Right on.
And the whole issue with police brutality in Ferguson or any of these other places, or the young brother who got wrapped up in a wrestling mat down south in Georgia with, body parts missing. The person who just got pulled out the lake and body parts missing. It's weird stuff that happens. The problem I find is there's always a reactive response to it, and there's no one regardless of whether or not you recognize or don't recognize, the effective truth is that there is someone that claims responsibility for doing certain things. And if that entity or body claims responsibility for it, then bind them to that which they promised themselves to, and then begin to move in binding and boxing them into that obligation. So the petition drive that we're putting together now is 15 to 17 years overdue.
Yes.
Because they passed the Executive Order 13107 in December 1998, but nobody actually put a budget behind it, and nobody ever appointed a head to the Interagency Workforce on Human Rights Treaties. So we can have the conversation here, and it can sound good, but if there's a problem, is there a place in the federal government where you can go to lodge your complaint? No. That agency was actually supposed to fix that 17 years ago. So I didn't, and I apologize if I came across as dismissive, but my point was the conversation about more Paleo-American or nationality for me is secondary because it really only addresses a person on an individual basis. The Interagency Workforce and Human Rights Treaties has a larger coverage and impacting a lot more people because if the executive branch issued it and spread that across all executive branches, then that means the Department of Justice has to go first, which means all law enforcement at the federal level has to immediately become sensitized to all human rights treaties. And since the DOJ funds state, county, and municipal for a portion of the federal programs that they get, it automatically cascades right down into the issue, which is what the whole petition drive is about. I don't think it should be that hard to get 50 or 100,000 signatures to support this, to send us Barack, whether we do it in person or whether we do it electronically, because it's an easy issue for them to listen to their constituents and understand that this is already there, it just hasn't been acted on.
Well, I wanted to wait the second hour so you can introduce that complete program.
Then let's stay here
on that rather than get into that now. But go back to what you're asking. What happened to the period from 1604, which is when they founded the first 13th colony, Virginia colony, when they came in the United States? So if we go from 1600 and go back to, let's say 1200 or, any way you want to go, where were the Moors, quote unquote? Where were the Indians, quote unquote? Where were the copper people? Where is that education? Since the European only started with his history, his story. And I'm trying to get away from that to find out what did we do.
Okay.
And all I'm saying, I've said it lately, that I think there's more to me than just being a Moor. I got to be something else. And the reason I say that is because there's so much crime. There's most of the people that I see that look like me don't act like me. And that bothers me. And I don't want to be associated directly with them as a lump.
Okay.
That they are Moors or they're colors or they're blacks or they're Negroes or whatever. I consider myself to be on a different plane. And that's why I'm getting into this, searching.
Okay.
You kind of dig it? So
yeah.
When I mentioned copper and now you're talking a paleo, all of that's good to me, and I'm not going to get hung up in it and run around and say I'm a copper of this. But I know there was more going on.
There was commerce.
Commerce.
Yeah, okay, so...
But listen, before you say that,
okay.
The only way that I can get a friend is through his spirit.
Yes.
You ain't coming to me because you look like me.
That's fair.
Okay.
That's fair.
So I got to check everybody from that spiritual level in order to go with me. But I don't need no crooks. That's why I go back to Big Mama. When I say Big Mama had a tribe.
Yes.
And she was the mother of the matriarch of the tribe. Papa was supposed to be and was the enforcer.
Yes.
of it. That's what I want to get back to.
Okay.
Now, how far back do I have to go to see that? I know Granny. I saw it in my grandmother. And I know it was in her mother and grandmother because she had it deep. She beat me every time she saw me. So I knew what was happening there. And y'all know, the ladies know, if Granny saw, and I'm going to say y'all, I ain't picking on nobody. But y'all know if Granny saw all that skin showing on these sisters, she'd have a broom and beat the hell out of them and get out of them spikes, them old high heel shoes. I've never heard that before. So we got to get back to that. That's all I'm saying. I want to get back to it. I don't care what will go with it.
Well,
so that's why I'm talking with you. I'm listening to her comment. I listen to a lot of them because we got to figure out how we're going to do this thing when we start asking for freedom.
Okay.
Well, you had mentioned copper. You don't talk about copper.
people.
And, you know, we are the copper colored people. All right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, and let me make sure that I'm understanding you correctly. So I'm going to kind of recite back to you in my words what I thought I heard you say.
I mean, I want to hear it, but go ahead.
Okay. All right.
I run my
we can have the historical lesson, but until it becomes applicable where we can use it in the family setting, from teaching the little babies stories about their people to transferring over to a new language to understanding how to reinstate our economic clanship, and those types of things. You got it, brother.
Okay. You got it.
I almost had to bite my tongue because that's the second segment you asked me to be quiet about. but I'll suffice it to say, everything that you are saying right now, it doesn't matter. Like, a lot of people would typically lump that into the black nationalism, Afrocentric movement.
Yeah.
They don't realize that there's a whole body of knowledge out there under human rights that does the exact same thing that's recognized internationally. And it doesn't do anything until a collective or group of people, like you said, doesn't matter what collective you go by, but whatever the collective is can actually move things once it decides it's a collective. That's a normal human trait, to be sociable and to want to work together with other people that you find of like mind. So if y'all decide y'all want to go this way, y'all want to call yourselves a certain thing, that's a human right to do that.
Yes.
However, it's not okay for an institution that was created out of a context strictly for commerce, called a colony, which that's what the word means.
Yep.
It's a business sanctioned and chartered by the king.
Yep.
To create 13 colonies, and then for people to wonder anything other than everything is commercial. Come on, the United States started as colonies. Those were commercial enterprises sanctioned by the king. Had to pay taxes.
Correct.
So every state is a commercial colony. And when you just said earlier, you know, there are folks that look like us that don't act like they're trying to take care of their business.
Correct.
Think about that phrase. Take care of your business.
Yes.
So if we aren't taking care of our business, then the system will automatically think you're foreign.
Have you ever heard of the book, The Forgotten Cause of the Civil War?
I had a mentor of mine recommend I read that book.
It started out at $50 a copy on Amazon, and today it's $1,000 a copy.
Mm-hmm.
I got a hold of it. I've read it. And once you realize what a mulatto is, your whole concept on all of this changes. Because if I ask everybody in here individually, what is a mulatto, I'll probably get a collective answer of a person light complected that had a European mama or papa. And as far as we can go. But what happens to that child where his grandma and grandpa were black and white, and the mama and daddy were black, but the baby is blonde hair, blue eyes, and pale skin? How did that happen? That's a mulatto. And maybe I didn't mix it right, but y'all know what I'm talking about. We can't, in other words, we can't see the other part of the mulatto because we can only look at one that's got color like us. But what about the thousands and millions that are white, completely white? And when you read this book, the problem with Lincoln and all of them racist people, they didn't know who was on their side. That was one of the biggest problems. So they had to free the slave, and Lincoln did free the slave, but he freed the white slave. It was all set up for him to free the white slave. They set up new rules for black folks through the labor codes and everything and kept them in slavery, which everybody knows. But the Europeans that were in slavery, I got a book on my website now that I'm selling as an ebook. It's called They Were White and They Were Slaves. And you sure enough need to look at that because they were passing for white when time was right and they passed for black when time was right. And that makes a problem.
Well, it wasn't a problem for them. You just have to remember there are certain cultures that are opportunists.
Yeah.
And you also have to remember that the majority of the first colonists were actually street beggars that were caught up in the European judicial system, especially the UK, where the magistrates were told anybody that gets caught begging gets sent to a colony for hard labor.
Yes.
So a lot of the people that came may have been down on their luck. They just got caught by the sheriff, and then they just got, oh, you begging, you got to go. You got tossed on a ship, and they were like, we don't care about you anymore.
But they say the 13 colonies, it was 200 years of white slavery in 13 colonies.
They actually
we don't even know about.
No. It's publicly available. Actually, there's a reference in my book in the back that actually points
to the best way to keep it away from black folks.
I can't argue with that, brother. I really.
So you put it in a book and you hide it. Why you look at me like that?
It's true.
Yep.
You're right.
You understand?
Yeah.
But I agree with you. It's because I found it and I was shocked.
They ran a census down in the islands during the time of slavery, and I talk about it in my book that they actually ran a census, and 75% of the slaves on that census down in the islands when they were doing the sugarcane slavery, they were white.
Yes.
And this was on the UK's website. This isn't an American website. This was the UK's website that they had the census reported from the ships that were transporting here, that those corporations were based out of the UK, so they were doing their taxes and laws in the UK.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't know the reason that they stopped the white slavery is because they came across a conundrum when they realized that they were enslaving their own brethren and other people, and they were like, wait, why are we enslaving people that look like us?
Yes.
Well, let's just make this simple and just take our folks out. And that's when they started to modify things.
And it's always been whatever the mother was, the child offspring would be.
Yeah.
If she was a slave, no matter who the daddy was, rich or otherwise, the babies would be slaves, and vice versa.
Yeah, that's a matriarchal system.
Yes.
That's not a patriarchal system.
Correct. You're right. But that changed my whole concept. That's why
they only did that for us. They never did that for themselves. They always traced themselves by father.
Wait a minute.
They always trace themselves by father. They don't talk about the famous women. They always talk about the fathers in that.
But now
they know that we are matriarchal people. So they kept the way that they know works for us, but they know that works for us.
All right, now I'm going to bring up another problem. Maybe you can help me clean it up. Antebellum was before the Civil War.
Yes.
Most of the laws in America were positive for black folks. Believe it or not, before the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And then they went into post-antebellum, and that's when the Jim Crow and all the stuff began and started throwing blacks into slavery and whatever, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's because they were free to sign contracts and enter into commerce and generate all the revenue. So and they had all the skill set, no assets.
Yes.
So any money they made, since they had no assets, they had no debts. See, we don't think about that part. We just think they didn't have any money, they got out of slavery, they didn't have anything, but they had all the skill set and no debts. So any contract that they entered into was 100% profit.
Yes, and they set up, after the war, a vagrant act.
Yeah.
That if you didn't have a job, you had to go to a camp. So they were stealing our labor and skills because we didn't have a job because they shut down and burned the plantations.
Right, and they did that because of the trade unions.
Right. That's some deep stuff.
Well,
I see why that book went up, because it reveals a lot just in thought, because it tears down everything that you were taught in school.
You just got to read the Romanus Pontifex.
I can't even pronounce it. You got to write that down.
Romanus Pontifex. Romanus. Romanus Pontifex. Pontif as in Frank, EX as in xylophone. Romanus Pontifex. It was
never heard of it.
It was a papal bull that came out that endorsed in writing perpetual slavery on non-European, non-Christian people.
Yes, I did a program on Pope Pius IX, and y'all look up Pope Pius IX. You talking about a crook and a he was bad, terrible. He set up the mafia.
This was a couple generations before him. But with the Romanus Pontifex, what they did is they authorized all rulers under the Christian banner in Europe to make war and subjugate. It didn't say kill. It said make war and subjugate the people and appropriate their assets for the benefit of Christian monarchs and keep the people in perpetual slavery. It actually used the phrase, when it translated to English, it actually said perpetual slavery. So when you come up with examples and you said Emancipation Proclamation, freedom, but it didn't really free them, or you say, okay, then we got Jim Crow laws, then we got rid of the Jim Crow laws, and they gave civil rights, and they gave civil rights, and they gave human rights, and they gave human rights, and they gave something else, and it's always one foot hopping to the other.
And we're still in slavery.
And it's still the same thing, because like you just said earlier, I got brothers ain't handling their business. Or if someone says, I was just reading on the way here when we were on our way from Chicago, that African American women are now the fastest growing population of unemployed, whereas in 2007, when the mortgage foreclosure crisis hit, African American men were 1 out of 2 was unemployed. It was 50% unemployment among the brothers. And our women had the highest employment, the highest income, the highest assets, and the highest education. Now, the sisters are falling prey to this as well because most of them were pursuing employment. They weren't setting up business, not realizing the system was designed for ownership, not participation.
Mercy. I think I got a phone call here. Let's see.
Okay.
Caller, do you have a question?
Falling prey to this as well because most of them, they weren't setting up business.
Yes. Yes, caller.
Participation.
Hello?
I think so. Yes.
Hello?
You have a question? Hello? Do you have a question?
Yeah, I got you
Hello?
on so many different speakers. I got you on so many different computers here. I looked up Romanus Pontifex. First of all, good evening, my dear brother. I'm enjoying this whole thing. I'm really enjoying this. I'm calling from Minnesota.
Good evening. Good evening.
Yeah, we are here, but few in number. But in any event, I am enjoying it. I did look up Romanus Pontifex, and it seems that there are 2 papal bulls. One was 1454. The other one was 1451. And I'm not sure which one specifically you were talking about, because and that's Wikipedia, where you don't believe nothing Wikipedia says. So you gotta go past that.
They were both continuations, and the language of both of them is very, very similar. And if you notice, both of them were right around the time of what they call 1492, which most of us associate with them landing over here in the United States, not realizing that was actually the end of a previous phase.
Wow.
It was the end of the Spanish Inquisition, and it was the successful reclaiming of Al-Andalus, Spain, by the Spanish Christian zealots over the African Moors who were Muslims and the Arab Moors who were Muslims who had joined in the middle and the end of that campaign. So 1492 represented that last 50 years. If you watch a map and it shows how they descended from the top of Spain down to the bottom, if you watch how that progressed over that timeline, you'll see that at 1492 they captured Grenada. That was the last stronghold that they got. Then they actually went from there here
to America.
Right.
Did you hear that, brother?
Yeah. I'm listening. I just wanted to get in. I want you to know, Brother Ron, I'm not sure what's going on with your personal website. I got you up on that too, but I haven't heard any sound on that. So I'm just giving you a little feedback. But I'm very much enjoying it, my brother. I tuned in late, so I don't know your name. I'm sorry about that. I'd like to know what your book is one more time before you get off. And I'm going to keep listening,
All right.
I'm waiting for the second half of the show. Thank you very much.
All right, good enough. We'll give you the name. All right. Pronounce your name again.
My name is Nasser M. Ali. You can purchase the book. It is available on Amazon. If you type in Paleo-American, it'll come up, or you can search Nasser M. Ali. It'll come up. Mm-hmm. Either one. It's a really good book. It's really kind of condensed. It's not a lot of stories. It's just raw information with references, so that people can come to their own conclusion how they want to process the information. That's the best way I've found to educate people, is not to try to bend them one way or the other, give them the information and let them figure out how best it settles for them.
Give us again the bulls that you said it was 2, and you say both are similar.
Yeah.
Can you tell us again what the bull was about?
Okay. You had the. Okay. Are you familiar with the Isle of Malta?
No.
Okay. There's an island that is actually called Malta.
Malta.
And it actually is a nation. and they call it the Isle of Malta, or the Isle of Man. It is close to the Vatican, but it's out in the water, like around the bottom of Italy. And it was the first major win of Christianity against the jihad of the African and Arab Muslims. It was the first time they had a major win, and it was basically an island that was being sieged by them, and they sent a small, what we would call a special ops group. They sent a special ops group of the Maltese Rosicrucians over there to teach the people how to fight back, and they held that island until reinforcements came. It was a major strategic loss for the Muslims because they wanted to use that as a staging drop-off point for war in the rest of that in the rest of the region. So it was a strategic loss, and it turned the tide of the battle. But on that island, I found interesting because I was approached by the Grand Master of the Knights of Malta when I went to the UN 3 years ago.
Oh,
yeah, I know. And in conversation, I began to figure out, because
how did he approach you?
He sent a woman from Nigeria to come talk to me.
Period. Just like you're now.
I was at the UN. I was in the indigenous conference.
Okay.
For the Tepe tribe, and we were there, and a sister from Nigeria talking about the Nigerian indigenous people who were there, and you had the brothers from the Maasai tribe and the South African tribes, they were there too. And so they saw me there, and they were like, "Oh, it's another brother in the room. Okay, who is it?" Because I was the new face.
Yeah. Okay.
So she came over and she spoke, and afterwards she said, "Grandmaster would like to meet you," and I was like, "Who?" She said, "Grandmaster Imbrika. He's the first Grand Master of this particular order in over, I believe, 297 years.
Ooh.
Was the last time they had an African be ahead of that order. And it was the Knights of Malta. So, me, I went and was like, where's Malta? What's Malta? What's going on? So as I started to research what it is, I realized that location is the first time I heard the term Paleo Christian. I didn't know what that was either, so I looked up what that was. And that was, they have some of the oldest tombs of Christians from the battle against the African and Arab Moors. And they didn't say who was buried there, but they called them Paleo-Christian because it was at the early phase of Christianity.
Wow.
And this island also has Gigantia, which is a huge UNESCO website that was supposed to be a temple of the goddess. So there was supposed to be this huge giant female that was 15 feet tall that moved these huge 40-ton monoliths and made the actual temple for the women to worship her. That's on that island too. That goes back about 10,000 years.
You went on the island?
No, I was just researching to find out who this man was, saying he was the head of the Knights of Malta, and I'm like, what are you? Not who are you, what are you? Because if you're saying you're the head of the Knights of Malta, then I need to understand what is Malta and what is its history and what's going on. Right. And when they asked me at the UN, "Oh, you're representing your tribe?" I said, "Yes, I am. That's my nation." She said, "Do you have an EIN number?" I said, "No, I do not." "Why do you ask?" She said, "If you have an EIN number, you're a corporation."
That's true.
So when she heard no, she said, "Grandmaster would like to meet you." And he issues his own passports.
Oh. Are you still in touch with him?
No, he passed away. He was looking for a successor. I met his wife. I met some other people. He was a really good brother who really meant well. I think he was trying to do some things out there to try to put things in position. I just think some people didn't believe he had access to what he thought he had.
Wow.
I know he had pictures next to the Pope, standing next to the Pope in the Vatican. I know that. So, and it was interesting because when you say they're the same as the Moors, I know Moors have gone to the UN, I know Moors have registered there, and then after a while they just kind of stopped going. Because you have to realize, even going to the UN will only they'll let anybody participate and watch, but you can't vote as an indigenous organization or Aboriginal, whichever term you want to use, and those mean two different things, by the way. Indigenous means less than 5,000 years to the UN. If you say Aboriginal, it means older than 5,000.
Why the UN when it was only founded for
Because the UN is a corporation of the assembly of nation states.
Well, I know they dissolved
The League of Nations.
League of Nations.
Yeah, they recreated it because they had some structural problems. That's all. If you actually go look back at even at the UN documentation, because the Cook County Law Library is one of the largest libraries in the United States. It's a great library, law library. In there, up on the 29th floor, in the back on the left, they have a whole section. They have bookcases that are about 12 feet tall. That they have like 2 or 3 of them. It's just UN books. That's it. It's the only place that has like a huge collection like that in the U.S. And as you go back to the early volumes at the beginning of the UN paperwork, it actually says League of Nations. So they just put a new name on it and just made the structural changes and kept going. They didn't really change anything.
Wow.
So it's just a new and improved League of Nations.
When was the League of Nations found?
That was the late 20s, early 30s, and then the UN was rebranded in 47.
Yes. So I'm trying to find out, where do you get the 5,000 years?
No. They refer to indigenous people in the. Okay, so you have the UN, and then you have these different bodies of the UN, and one of them is the Economic and Social Council. If you look at the structure, the Economic and Social Council has DESA, which is a sub-organization, and under that it has the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues under that. So there's these layering of programs. The Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues has biannual meetings, May and August every year. Anybody can register and go. If you don't do nothing stupid, they'll let you come. They'll let you talk to people. They'll let you watch. If you want to vote as a participating tribal entity, regardless of whatever name you want to use, you have to be fully recognized by the nation state that is an active member of the United Nations, which means the Washita, the Yamasee can, because the Yamasee are actually on the list. The Washita are now actually on the list in the Federal Register as a federally recognized tribe, so they can't go and participate and vote. Like, for instance, I have submitted a petition to the Bureau of Indian Affairs for TEPI to be recognized federally. And they didn't answer.
What about the seat they talk about?
What you mean the seat? 15/93?
Yes.
That was a individual registration. But that was just I got a registration for mine that has this numerical sequence for the tribe that we registered there. But that doesn't mean that you can vote in the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. You can go. You can take pictures. You can have on your tribal garb. You can go there. You can meet the people. You can in the room. You can listen to the mic. You can take camera shots. You can meet people. You can network. You can interact. But if you go to the side meetings, you aren't going to be sitting at the table voting. And most people, when I found out, I was working with a sister that had an NGO there, and she actually was the president of the Global Indigenous Peoples Caucus, which are voting indigenous groups that have meetings separate from the 2 meetings there at the UN. They have caucuses by region of the planet. They have North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia. They have regions, and then each region may have sub-regions. So all year long, these tribes are sponsoring their delegates to go and vote. So when they get there, if the Washita show up, they're at the tail end of a whole year's worth of policy. There has been meetings behind closed doors where by the time these indigenous tribes come to the table at the IMF and the World Bank, they already know what they want. Their tribe has said what they want. The people in that state said what they want. The people in that region of the country, the people in that region of the world have all voted on this is what we want. These are our problems. This is what we're doing. These are our census. This is how many women we got. This is how many kids we got. This is how many people are working, not working. These are the issues going on our land. Everybody said the story all year long. Now they organized it, condensed everything. So when they come into the meetings, they're already speaking their script.
What about the Yamasee? Do they have a better seat?
They are federally recognized. They're on the list.
So they're on the list.
They could register and vote. Yeah, they could register and vote. Yes, they could send delegates if they wanted to. I know I've met a couple Washita before in Chicago, and they've shown me the court case they had in the Court of Federal Claims. That's not, in my opinion, that's not the proper place to do it. Not the Court of Federal Claims. That court is a special jurisdiction court. Its charter can only handle issues where you have a contract with the federal government. It's a contract. Yes, a treaty is considered a contract, but they're going by the secular definition of the word.
What area should they file
When I submitted my petition, when I and the deputy and the Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare, when we submitted our petition to the Bureau of Indian Affairs to recognize us as Paleo-American mound builders, they didn't really know what to say because there's no laws governing Paleo-Americans. The only law that's there that allows people to submit a petition to be federally recognized is somebody that identifies as an American Indian. Since I didn't submit the petition as an American Indian, they didn't know what to say. So they didn't say anything for a year until we tapped them on the shoulder and said, you know we sent that to you, right?
Yes.
Can we get an answer on that? And they didn't answer, so we asked the Office of Inspector General that works within the Department of Interior who was the name of the person that did it and how do we escalate and have them written up. Because they're required under the regulation to acknowledge within 30 days and respond within another 60, and they didn't do anything for 12 months. So I was feeling a little hurt, you know. So they responded, and they directed us to a person within the Division of Law within the Department of Interior to address the issue. And when the person from OIG gave me that attorney's name, I looked up who that attorney was. And come to find out, she trained the Department of Justice in a court case called Bonitson in Seattle, up in Washington, or near Seattle. And she trained the DOJ in a case that lost. And it was about the Kennewick man. The Kennewick man was a Paleo-Indian remains that was found out by the trail, and the local university picked it up. They analyzed the skull. They said this is a Paleo-American. It's not a Native American. The federally recognized tribes used the law they lobbied to get created to take it back. So they went and complained to the BIA and said, we got this law, we want this back, these are our ancestors. And the BIA did an administrative proceeding acting in a judicial capacity and said, give it back to the tribe. They gave it back to the tribe. The tribesmen cut their hand and dropped their blood on top of it, destroyed the sample, and the Army Corps of Engineers dumped 10,000 pounds of rock on it, so can't nobody get back onto it. Whoa. Now, this was in the middle of the court case. So it went from the state court to the federal court, and when it got to the federal court, the federal judge, after he reviewed the analysis of the university, because they had gotten all the data before they took it back. They had all the data. They just didn't have the specimen. When they analyzed the data, they said these skulls look like sub-Saharan Africans and Australian Aboriginals. They don't look like American Indians. So the judge said, you can't have it. Those people don't look like you. They didn't belong to you. Then they went to the federal appellate court, and the federal appellate court had actual hearings, and they have recorded some of this, and it is available on certain internet websites where you can actually go listen to the appellate court justice ask the DOJ. So everybody on the planet knows the Mongoloid form did not exist more than 35,000 years ago on the planet. The European form with pink skin did not exist more than 8,000 to 12,000 years, judging by the most common recent ancestor that creates European pink skin. So anything older than 35,000 years on the planet had to look like you, sir. There are Paleo-American remains that are older than 35,000 years. It couldn't have looked like Pocahontas. It's not physically possible because they weren't walking on the planet yet. So the appellate court justice asked the DOJ, so if you found a modern human remain that's 75,000 years old, you still gonna call it American Indian, huh? And the DOJ officer said, yup, and straight-faced it. He's like, that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Right.
Wow.
Because they can't, if they go against the story, it undoes everything. Everything just kind of unravels, because if you admit that there were people here before the American Indians got here in the public, then you're giving the check to the wrong people.
Yes. Yes.
And that means you have to correct all the history books.
Right.
And that's 500 years worth of, at least since 1847, they haven't actually even admitted it. But in 1847, they kind of admitted it. They just put a number in a book, and you're supposed to somehow magically figure out what that number means. Because the number represents the prognatism of the face, which is a Negroid trait. And if you don't know what that number is, you think somebody's just being a fancy scientist trying to look real smart by putting a chart in the book when he actually described your face from the side with a number. So he turns your attribute into a number and put it in the book and put you on the wall, which is the same thing the brother said earlier. It's a mean thing to put somebody in the book and then put you on the shelf. Which is, you could call it magic if you want to, but that's a hell of a magic trick.
Where's the case now?
It's done. They lost. It's over. So this is the attorney that the OIG sent us to talk to force a response to the petition.
Right.
So when I called
the loser, yeah.
Right, she was a loser, and she knows what a Paleo-American is.
Right. Okay.
She knows what it is.
All right.
So when I called her, I was like, okay, we got this petition. We sent it a year ago. Y'all haven't responded. The Code of Federal Regulations says y'all supposed to respond. And she was like, oh, well, I don't know why they didn't respond. And I was like, counsel, please don't treat me stupid. I do have a master's degree. Please don't do that. I know who you are. I know what case you participated in, and I know you trained at DOJ, and I know you lost. You know exactly what a Paleo American is, and I bet you also know that when I filled out the census, I put my race down as Paleo American. And you know every United Nations law that I put in the actual charter of our tribe there that you have in front of you that you most likely have, and you know we have a human right to do it this way and self-identify the way that we want to because we want to participate this way, just the way we want to participate. I don't need to prove anything. That was the issue I had with the Washita, because I met with the Washita and the Empress's nephew and his son, and they were like, well, you don't have to trace nothing. I said, by human rights, I don't have to trace anything. I can just decide who I want to be, how I want to. So I don't have to learn a long history lesson. I just focus on moving forward, which is what you're talking about.
Yes.
Which is how do we get the collective process going to create enough space to reduce some of this heat, because it's hot right now.
Yes,
it's tense out here. You know, folks is mad and stuff is going wrong real fast. Temperatures are flaring and folks dying. You know, it's not just a history lesson conversation. How do we not only recapture this 100,000 plus years, but how do we, like you said, take the stories, bring them back, restore the lost information, restore the history in yourself. At the same time, how do you organize the people to get the government back in line with the way that we need them to operate so we can do what we're supposed to do?
Yes.
How do we establish the old ways where our people used to be able to work with each other and get the government to understand and appreciate that without trying to turn it into something evil?
All right, hold up. I was going to use that as a segue to take a break.
All right. Okay.
And then when we come back, we'll take 10 minutes. We'll answer the questions, too. And then we're going to go into your program, how we can face this problem.
Absolutely.
Is that good? Everybody good with that? All right. 10-minute break.
When you said for us to take care of our business,
yes,
found on that what you mean. And the second part of that is how can you get us as a nation of people to do business with each other instead of going out to other nationality of people when we're supposed to be supporting ourselves.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Okay. Well, let me just repeat the question first to make sure that everybody heard it the same way. You mentioned it in two parts. The first one is a general, what does it mean to handle your business? And the second one is, how do our people figure out how to get that together to be able to make it more effective for us? Did I get that close to right?
Second part is how we support each other.
Okay. How do we support each other? Commercially. The first one, I like to look at it from where things are right now, because that's really all that matters as far as what is relevant and effective. Right now, we have a abstracted existence that requires you to go through 4 hoops to get anything done. You're not putting a seed in the ground, growing it, and putting it in your mouth. That's one step. You got to go through high school. You got to go through college. You got to go get some experience. You got to go get an apartment. You got to sign a lease. You got to get insurance. You got to pay a note on a car. You got to go get gas. You got to get insurance. You got to get tires. You got to go to a store. You got to walk in the store. You got to pay for clothes that were shipped there on a truck. It came from another company that actually assembled it, and they bought that from another company that just made the fabric. So it's everything is like 8 to 10 to 12 steps. So it's abstracted. And I don't think our people really understand that in order to succeed in that type of system, you have to jump in and make something or offer something. We don't really get that. We're on the cultural, social, spiritual, and we don't really talk about the commercial aspect. Like early on in my studies, I came across an original dissertation from a grad student at the University of Michigan here in the state. And it was about Olmec trade routes. It was really interesting because this person got their PhD writing about how they traded cocoa and hematite from Mexico to Southwest in the United States. That's what the whole article was about. It showed the location where they used to mine it. In this book, she actually went through and gave the Nahuatl name for what we would call account managers. Right, the account manager was one person in the Olmec tribe that knew they ran the route for this product from this location to that location. They knew the people there. They knew what they needed. They knew how much they needed to take. They knew the schedule they needed to get there, and all they did was run that route like a truck driver, right? So they had these people that would run routes moving product in the Olmec days. So when you mention how do we reinstill this, if you look at these models, they're still there. They're just spread out in all these research articles. We have to assemble it back together, and I use the term economic clanship because that's really what it was. You know, my people are from Tennessee. You know, my parents and on my father's side are from Tennessee, and they talked about when I went to Fisk and I would meet my grandmother's sisters, they would discuss how families would group together and families together moved from the south to the north in groups. They weren't all blood, but there would be 2 or 3 clans that knew each other, that may have had land to each other, and they would all decide, we all going to send our kids, or we're all going to take the next 10 years and get everybody up there, so we're going to send 2 of the young brothers up there, 22 years old, to go work at the plant. Then once he gets his apartment, then we're going to send somebody, send some of the young girls up there, send some of the younger families up there. So it was a phased migration where families would share money between each other, and they would share goals as a family together. That economic clanship is not something that we do now.
So what the basic answer is, we need more education.
Yes, and we need working models that people that become functional, where we say, okay, if the average household family has 4 people, but the average clan will have 12 to 15 to 20, and you need 5 clans, because 100 people buys a lot of stuff. 100 people buys a lot of stuff. That's a lot of food every month. That's a lot of diapers. That's a lot of water. That's a lot of sewage. That's a lot of clothes being washed, dirty drawers, kids, shoes, socks, underarm deodorant, toothpaste, shampoo, clothes, T-shirts, hats, jackets, nails, glasses, home insurance, car insurance, tires, lipstick. They don't go to a doctor. They have a physician that has a retainer. The physician is paid to keep everybody healthy. That's his job. You see what I'm saying? So he services multiple clans. So he doesn't have to have an office. They just pay for him to make trips, and then they bring all the kids and family together in one house, and then he just goes down the line. He just comes to the room, sit down, what's wrong, what's going on? And then he just goes through the next one, and then after he does his house call, it's a house call, he goes to the next clan. But setting up those type of arrangements means that it has to be economically viable for him, because instead of having an office and insurance and equipment and somebody behind a desk, he now has to get the equivalent amount of currency coming into his business to cover him doing this instead of that. So we have to ask, when we say we want to support someone, we have to put a number, because this is all commerce, you have to put a number on what it would take to sustain that person for their own life, and then be able to funnel enough current into it that it makes it viable where the person can do what we need them to do. Like, you do this, and this establishment obviously is running enough current for me to be sitting in this building. Otherwise, we'd be on the street.
Oh, okay.
You see what I mean? So there's enough current coming through here with the kitchen in the back, the books. There's enough commerce going through here to support being able to have these venues. And when people stop coming, unless this is brought outright, and you still got to pay taxes, so there's still going to be some amount of current that has to go into it. So people vote with their dollars.
Yeah, but you've given up a completely financial education.
This is a colony, sir.
Yeah.
I just said earlier, it's a commercial enterprise sanctioned by the king.
Yes.
Everything is commerce. It's not moral or social. It's purely economic. The other piece comes ancillary. And if you understand that, everything becomes smooth, because you can't make any mistakes at that point, because everything's commercial.
Yeah. All right. That cover you? All right. Anything else before we move on? You got a question? No.
Yeah, I just say one quick. What I've heard, it's like building a house. You build one brick at a time. And if you don't build something, you can get into this mess where in the 15 years, and you won't get out of it in 15 years. We've been a long time with people getting into this mess. And he mentioned about the man as a traveling around as an Orthodox Jew and mixed with a lot of ethnicities. That man is probably 5, 6, 10,000 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't just walk into there. It's already established long ago. And he just inherits what has been put in the place. And that's what we're doing now. We're trying to find out from our ancestors what is it that they want us to do. And we're too busy listening to the pork choppers. Listening to somebody that's not going to tell us anything that's going to help us.
All right.
There are things that they don't want you to know that will not benefit them personally.
All right. We got, thank you, EK. We got some calls. I don't know how we're going to do this real quick. But we got another day before I take this call. We're going to do it again tomorrow. You can go to Ron March Show. No. RonMarch.com. Go to the top. It'll say Ron March live, feed, or blog. You can choose either one. We'll be on film and we'll be on a radio blog tomorrow. I don't know where we're going to be, like open forum tomorrow, but we're going to be somewhere. We'll let you know. Go to my website and then you'll find out if you want to show up. But if you don't, just want to see the show, you can go to my website, ronmarch.com. 6 o'clock tomorrow. Yes. Let's check this call. Do you have a question or comment, caller, for our guest? Nasir Ali?
Yes.
Yes, caller. Oh, nothing there. Check the next one. Yes, caller.
Yeah.
Area code 0. I'm good, brother. Go ahead. How you doing?
Okay, yeah, man. Thanks for the guest. I'd like to say thank you for the guest, man, bringing out this information and everything, man. And I've been going over some of this information the last couple of days of studying the Paleo word and everything. And they have several subject matters that they always been studying on this because it goes back to ancient words and things like that. It's the first form of humankind that goes back 3,800 million years ago, before the so-called human race started morphing into other form of species. So this is the foundation archetype. You know, it's the study between biology and ecology. So you check and look at the research of, you'll find they have several subject matters on paleo or paleontology, and you also look up Aristotle when they brought in their form of physiognomy, and they stole that from the Babylonians based on the features, because we supposed to based on our phenotypes, not just bloodline.
Okay.
You understand?
So you've done some research. Sound like you done some extensive research, brother, into this.
Yeah, they've been studying on this. It's right in our face, and they're masking with talking about plants and other things, but all that's relative to us. But they'll tell you that they tell you about the human prototype, which is the most ancient. Paleo means old, ancient. Sarah Paleo means again, backwards. You understand? So they using these words right in our face. They telling us. They codify.
All right.
So it's
appreciate
about research. All right, thanks.
All right, I appreciate your call. We got one more call before we get into his message, why he's in Detroit, and what the program he's trying to extend. Yes, caller, area code 919.
Yeah, I got a quick question. Hello? Can you hear me?
Go ahead, yes, we can.
Yeah, I got a question for the guest. Now, I looked at the website, the paleoamerican.com, and I see you got that Lucia prototype on your website. And I think the archaeologist that found her said that she came from, I think it was Australia. So my question is to you is, where did the first Negro Paleo American come from? Did they originally come from Australia, Africa, or somewhere else?
I believe the brother said Brazil, but I'll let him answer it.
The oldest Well, I know that recently they just found another one that they
Another
said. Luzia. Lucy's in South Africa. Luzia is in Brazil. Luzia is Portuguese for light bringer.
Light bringer. Light bringer.
Like Lucifer. Luzia, Lucy. Light.
Yeah.
Luzia is in Brazil, and that was 11,500 years old. They found another one that they said was a little bit older than that. However, you asked the question about the oldest evidence of humanity or the oldest modern human remains. The oldest one that I know of is referenced in the book that I wrote, and they found a anatomically modern atlas cervical vertebra, which is the neck bone right below the skull that holds. Atlas was supposed to be the one that held up the world, so the world is supposed to be your head. The first cervical vertebrae under your head is called the atlas bone. It has two protrusions coming out of the side. They found a anatomically modern atlas bone undisturbed in the soil at a level that they carbon dated in 1984 that was 3.59 million years old.
Oh! Did you hear that, brother?
Wow. Yeah, and where did they find that bone at?
Well, they found it in Argentina, at the southern tip of America. It was not found in Africa. So when we talk about humanoid versus human, this was human, right. Homo sapiens. This was not a hominid. This was not Lucy. This was not human-like. It was an actual human being, 3.59 million years old, bone in the soil. So I don't really, that's why I said earlier, I didn't just lob it out there and say out of Africa is a theory just to be saying that. I actually said it as a biology major where I was taught the out of Africa theory, and now I question it because of that particular find that was done in 1904, 1906 by Professor Amegano, who wrote a series of articles on it, and they destroyed his career. His son and his nephew continued his work after he passed away to make sure it didn't get swept under the rug.
Wow.
Okay, cool. So basically, you're saying that it's possible that they could have actually always been here and not came from Africa. Okay.
Yeah, there's more than one theory. There's the out of Africa theory. There's a theory that says there was multiple humanity evolved in multiple places at the same time. Not migrations. Multiple locales of evolution, meaning humanity evolved the same way at multiple locations at the same time. There's another one that says the oldest remains were in South America. There's another one that says the oldest remains were in Australia. And you can find these if you go do the research articles because somebody wrote that to get their master's or their PhD. So there's different theories out there. The one that's just marketed as the most accepted is the out of Africa theory, but most people aren't taught about the other ones.
Right. Let's cover your question. All right, brother. I appreciate you calling.
All right,
Where are you calling from? Where are you calling from?
North Carolina, actually.
All right. I just came from North Carolina.
All right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, brother. Have a good evening. All right. Now, we got to get busy real quick here, and we want to talk quickly about the program that you're setting forth, and you're starting it in Detroit. We understand it. Take over, brother, because we don't have much time.
All right. You've heard me interject a little bit about human rights while I'm here. I am a human rights defender. I do my best to do my duty by my people. And I have become aware that it is everybody's responsibility to push for and advocate the full implementation of human rights, and that the courts have ruled that they're not self-executing, meaning if we don't push for them, they really don't matter. So raising them on an individual basis is one way, or we could actually form a collective and begin to push. As I began to figure out how to help people individually with it, I really wanted to move in a different direction, see what we could do to get a larger impact. And I was informed on a call about Executive Order 13107, passed in December 1998 by former President Bill Clinton. And it is called the Interagency Workforce on Human Rights Treaties. That's the name of the executive order. And it was supposed to establish this federal agency to manage the implementation of human rights into public policy. Its job and function was also to be an interface to the public to receive complaints about human rights, but no one was ever appointed to head that organization. A budget had never been established for them. And I think that this might be a good starting place for the people to actually ask, there's two things that have to happen. The NSA, the National Security Agency, the head is Susan Rice. She's the former permanent ambassador of the United States of America to the United Nations. So she has an extensive background in the UN work. The NSA director's job is to appoint the head to the Interagency Workforce on Human Rights Treaties. That role, I think she's very qualified to do so. She has to name the head, but still the President of the United States has to give a budget, and only he can allocate the funds, because that's his job as the Chief Executive Officer. So the petition is geared toward those two entities, those two roles and incumbents, to establish to get the government to do anything that's in alignment with them. It's just a conversation. I want to move beyond the conversation and ask them to set up the budget and appoint somebody to it that we can hold accountable for it. And I don't think that's unreasonable. It doesn't require any of the indigenous or tribes to bicker with one another. It doesn't require the Afrocentric and the Kemetic to conflict with one another. This is an issue where the entities that are claiming jurisdiction and enforcement are now being held to the same standards that
I studied African American history when I got to college, and I always asked in grammar school and high school, why do I learn the same thing every year from fourth grade to I got to junior year and was about to take my Constitution, and I was like, I don't want to take it because I don't even understand why this applies to me. And I had a life teacher, her name was Ms. Haywood, and she actually sat us down and taught us about African American history because I continuously asked her, and she let me know, like, well, this is just curriculum and those things of that nature. And I appreciated her for doing that because I wanted to know. So I took the initiative and I went to the back of the book, and I feel that it's basically just creating our own community resources and our own education system. The people who have the knowledge, give it to the people who want to be, educated, or create, not force it on people, but create it where it's interesting enough for people to want to be educated, to want to know about their history and their ancestors and past.
Do you stay in Detroit?
No, I'm from Chicago.
All right. Well, I'm asking because that type of conversation and leadership is what we need for the younger group, and we need to set that up. Betty and Kelly are working with this program. Have you got something new or different? How we can start getting these signatures and stuff?
Well, I don't think one of the people moving is great.
Stand up. What are you doing? Yep.
Well, one of the things is I know that Wayne State University, they have student organizations. And so what I was thinking is that maybe a good way to get people to get involved, to, talk to email to people that deal with human rights and to tell them that what we're trying to do. So that's one thing. And then there's an assistant professor, her name is Blanche Cook, and she wrote about human rights. So I was thinking about having her for a panel discussion, but I think that if we speak to her and then we tell her what we're trying to do, I think that she can give us a lot of guidance on how we can get a lot of young people from Wayne State to try to volunteer to get these get a signature for the petition.
Question: is there a timetable on this?
We have a 6-month timetable because we want to reserve the last 3 months of the year to make sure that we package everything and take it to him. Because remember, this is the last year of Barack being in office, correct?
Yes.
So he just gave his presidential pardon. So he's already feeling, he's already doing his I'm on my way out movement. So since he's already doing the I'm on my way out movement, we need to add this to the list of, since you're on your way out the door, why don't you take care of this right quick? That's really what we need. We need to make sure that he's aware that everybody knows you have the ability to add this to your budget, and he does have the ability under the Constitution to make changes to the executive branch for any new things that came up. For those who are familiar with like TSA and Border Patrol and things like that, they did a major reorganization. They took like 10 or 12 organizations from other entities and smashed them all under DHS, Department of Homeland Security. and they had to create a new IT infrastructure for that. I was working on one of the projects for one of those sub-entities for a while when I was an IT contractor. So I understand that the president can actually restructure the budget and create new things and then put a budget on top of it and put somebody there and move something. The question is, are we going to get enough support to where he thinks that the constituents really need and want this? And what's the benefit of it? I know that for a while Detroit had an issue with the water, and the folks in the UN came down here and stopped some nonsense before it got too bad with the water getting cut off. Yeah. So the reason we wanted to start here in Detroit is because there's already a recent experience where the human rights had an immediate, tangible, direct win for the people to stop a major catastrophe and injury from happening. Now come behind that and say, other than just say, hey, it worked, why don't we try to make that permanent?
And the specifics of this drive is to have Obama recognize human rights in the United States?
No. The specifics of the campaign is to have him establish a budget for Executive Order 13107 and have Susan Rice appoint a head to the agency. We are literally to the point where we need a budget and a name, and then they can figure out where they want to put the office or whatever, but we need them to set up the budget, allocate funds, and put somebody in charge of it to get it moving. So what's happening in different educational systems, what's happening with the water, what's happening with the wrongful foreclosures, wrongful tax sales, police brutality, which is a violation of the Code of Conduct for Law Enforcement Officials, which is another international declaration at the UN. There's something called Code of Conduct for Law Enforcement Officials. There's no reason that these things should be happening in a chartering member of the United Nations.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to figure out about the petition itself. Betty, do we have any petitions drawn up? Do we know what?
We're actually waiting on that information.
Mm-hmm.
My thought was that we would, get and do a grassroots drive to reach all sectors of people.
Okay.
We have, this experience, the water and all the foreclosures. Right now is a critical time for people. Their emotions are high and they're willing to, to accept something to be done about what's going on. No longer are they willing just to sit back. The brother over here was explaining to me that there is a mandate that people are going to, the police are taking people's cars out of their driveway who don't have insurance on them. Yeah. This kind of stuff has to stop.
Yeah. There's two parts to it, and I'm going to add in this other piece too. There is language in one of the declarations that has been abbreviated, the Declaration on the Right of Human Rights Defenders, that says you have a right to ask public officials how they implement human rights in their daily job. That would be an excellent thing to take to a town hall meeting. Everyone has the right to ask public officials and get a response on how they implement human rights in their job function as government employees. So that applies to the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, be it city, county, state, or federal. That's one of the reasons why I push human rights so well, because a lot of us don't know you actually have a right to ask and get an answer. What do you do with this information, sir? You get paid off taxpayer dollars. How do you implement this? And if you don't have an answer for me, the next time I talk to you, let's try to work it out together and see what the answer should be. And there's a declaration that also says you have a right to guide the implementation in the way you see fit, which means folks got to get together and go, how do we want this to look? Which requires folks to be educated, like you said, and understand what's there. So maybe we need to have a public teaching. Maybe I need to have a forum where I can sit down and show you all some of the stuff that's there. Because I know I go through about 80 declarations and about 13 treaties about every week. There's that much information that I have access to that I use for any client at any given time. There's that much information. So I don't need civil rights to find a problem. I can make a long 3, 4, 5, 6-page list of all the human rights violations on one person's conversation off of those 80 declarations and 13 treaties. But if it goes to court and the judges try to play like it's not a federal law, or the executive branch law enforcement acts like they don't have a code of conduct, or if you do have a court case and it doesn't turn into actionable monetary damages for the tort violation, it doesn't mean anything. It has to have some teeth. That means it has to be fully implemented, and the government has to accept responsibility for implementing it.
What is this 13107?
Executive Order 13107, December 1998. 1998, yes.
98. December.
So the petition drive is enabled, ascend to safeguard our human dignity. Because we do have to ascend our thinking. Like you said, we have to think from a higher level and stop trying to attack each problem as it pops up. To look at it from the top down and go, what's the smoothest way to get the fastest response?
All right. We can keep discussing it, but it's 9 o'clock. And we need to take, I hate to say it, Betty, you should do this. We need to take up. We need to take up a donation for the building, whatever we have.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay.
We can pay her for being in there.
Yeah.
But Ron, I need you to make an announcement though about tomorrow, where we're gonna be tomorrow.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, you go ahead. I know what you're talking about. But I don't know where my show will be. Will it bother you to do it on the phones?
The Haven is 7 miles where you will be. 18846 West 7 Mile.
18846 West 7 Mile.
Oh, yeah.
And that is at 6 o'clock tomorrow?
6 p.m. Eastern Time.
Yeah. It's a dance studio.
It's called the Unique Dance Studio.
Right on the corner, 7 miles.
Excellent. Okay.
I'll put it on my site tonight.
I'll put it on my site and we'll get it out on social media.
We're going to do the same thing, but we're going to start out with information on this. I'm going to look it up tonight, executive order.
It's on the website. Go to paleo-american.com. There's a civics page that has the downloads available for you already. You don't have to look for it.
We'll talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah.
I do also want to make mention that after the show tomorrow at 8:30, we're going to be meeting at the Motor City Casino for a meet and greet with Dr. Nasir, and we are, there's a seating area down near the soundboard, down by the food court. They have seating and tables, so we're just going to, have a little family meeting and get this issue together.
Absolutely.
At 8:30.
In the morning?
Evening, after the show.
Sorry, yeah. See ya. How do you spell your name?
First is Neser. Middle is capital E, lowercase m. Last name, capital N, lowercase e, lowercase h, lowercase e, lowercase h, space, capital A, lowercase l, lowercase I. Paleo-american.com. You're very welcome, sister. DK, put that in the donation. Absolutely, please represent.
Different, let me think about my question. Okay. So do you talk about like the laws like that goes with people if they want to know or get educated on it? Because I'm actually almost done with probation and all that stuff. I've never paid them any money yet.
Yeah.
I give my money.
I teach private civics classes. I do take some people's cases. It depends.
Okay.
There's some folks who really need some help. Some folks who just need a little conversation. It just depends on what it is that they're looking for.
This is my first time, some jobs you go apply to, whether you're a first offender or a 7-time offender, it's no different. Oh, your work history is awesome. I like your resume. Background check. Oh.
Yeah, but yep. Mhm.
You can't work here. You have DUI. Not even. Let's sit down. Let's talk about. Well, what happened?
No, they don't want to have. They don't want to have the conversation at all. They aren't interested.
Mine wasn't out for recreational. I had to respond to an emergency for one of my kids. I just so happened to get put up with swerving. I was speeding trying to get to my baby. But
Everybody get that?
you drinking? Yes. There's no liquor on my breath. I was asking you a question. Like for real. But yeah, so I don't know if I can get some advice or help or something, so I don't want that already.
You need to know how to go in and have that conversation with the judge.
Okay.
That's what you need help with. There is a process and procedure to go in, and the judge needs to see the certain things in the paper in order for you to be able to have that conversation first. That's usually the hardest part.
Right.
Is knowing how to get the right instructions in to have the space to have a conversation.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's very, very possible.
Yeah. So just connect with you on your website.
Yeah, there's a form on the website where you can schedule a consult. If you have the documentation, I do document reviews. Like he has places where you may say, give me gratuity, but I need to take a look at the documents. I had a brother call me the other day. He was in foreclosure. He wanted to go to federal court. He showed me his document. I looked over the document. I was like, okay, the pleading isn't that bad, but I was like, if you're active in foreclosure, I'm not going to really let you pay me to help you draft a complaint for federal court because the federal judge is going to kick it back down to state court. He was like, huh? I was like, I can't accept it, bro. I was like, that'd be nice, but I'm not going to do that to you. The judge is going to kick you back down to state court. You need to worry about the fight in state court because they didn't have a judgment yet, so he was still fighting. I'm like, the federal judge is not going to let you start a second court case in federal court when you got an active, foreclosure going to state court. You need to focus on killing that first before you go into federal court. So I was like, I looked over, you're going to have to switch directions and go look at what's in front of you because you trying to start another fight and you're not dealing with, you in the ring right now, bro. It's an active bout going on. You trying to jump over and start another fight. No, don't do that. So I try to let people know what I know works and what doesn't work. And, I have folks who do some real good research in addition to myself. So, yeah.
You got to exhaust all your remedies at the law.
Yeah.
Once they give you a decision, then you move on. Then you move on.